Hi everyone, my name is Felipa, and today is day 75 of reading this big Bible. So here we have how Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, gathers all of his horses and men and all of that, and he basically threatens Ahab, the king of Israel, and he says, I will take all that you have. And in chapter 20, verse 4, the king of Israel says, My lord, O king, according to the saying, I am thine and all that I have. And the messengers go back to Ben-Hadad. They say, You're going to have exactly what you ask. But then Ahab speaks to his elders and they say, No, you're not going to let him do that. And there is a fight that happens. And it says that the Lord is with Ahab. And this could be kind of strategic on God's part because he is just wanting to show that even though he's not necessarily with Ahab, he's very much against other type of kings or leaders who believe in false gods, which is what Ben-Hadad of Syria is. So Syria and Israel go into war, and Israel beats Syria. Then there's a second war that comes up, or a second attack, and it says Ahab was forewarned that Syrians will attack again at Aphek. And it actually says that the army of Syria thought that that the only reason that Israel won in the first place in the first war, in the first battle, is because their God, so the actual Lord, is able to fight in the hilly areas. And it says here, even in verse 23, it says, And the servants of the king of Syria said unto him, Their gods are gods of the hills, therefore they were stronger than we, but let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. So essentially, these warriors of Syria think that the Lord is only strong in the hills and not in the plains. So they try to fight Israel in the plains, and they once again lose as well. A prophet condemns Ahab for making a covenant with Ben-Hadad. So because Ben-Hadad and his men were hurt, a bunch of his men were dead, Ben-Hadad wants essentially like asylum. And so him and Ahab make this covenant that Ahab will not be killed. And there is a prophet that says, you turned away from God because God wanted utter destruction of Ben-Hadad, and you did not do that. So it says here in verse 42, And he said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction, therefore thy life should go for his life, and thy people for his people. So essentially Ahab will die. Ahab also randomly here wants Naboth's vineyard, who says to him, No, you can't have it. Then Jezebel writes a letter to the nobles of the city that dwell with Naboth, and she writes the letter out in Ahab's name, and fakely says that Naboth had conducted blasphemy against God, and so they read this letter and they end up stoning him to death. And then we go into this little section here where Elijah says to Ahab, God is still coming after you, and you will not have anything in life. And God, essentially, it says in verse 29, says, Seest thou how Ahab humbleth himself before me? Because he humbleth himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days will I bring the evil upon his house. So essentially, the Lord says that, everybody of Ahab's and the people will die. The dogs shall eat his wife by the wall, and all these things. And then Ahab hears these words from the prophet, and he is sick to himself, and he says, rents his clothes, puts the sackcloth upon his flesh, fasts and lays in the sackcloth and went softly. And that's how Elijah, or the Lord, comes to Elijah, and he says, see how Ahab humbles himself. Okay, I'll spare him, I won't kill him, but I will not forget all the evil he's done, and I will bring evil, not in his days, but in his son's days. So essentially saying that even if God doesn't punish you immediately, there's always some sort of a consequence that will come and follow you. And then we have another prophet here. So there is a conversation between Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, and the king of Israel, and they talk about going against Syria again. And another prophet by the name of Micaiah prophesies that Ahab is going to be killed during this battle. And Ahab has an issue with him because he says whenever he prophesizes against Ahab. That's exactly what ends up happening as prophesied. And it says Ahab slept with his fathers. And then just a little summary here before the end of Kings, the first book of Kings, is that Shaphath reigned over Judah. He made peace with the king of Israel, and he removed the Sodomites out of the land. And later on, he passed away, and Ahaziah was the son of Ahab, who began to reign over Israel, and he did the same sort of evil his dad did, and turned away from the Lord, and served the fake god Baal, and worshipped him, and angered the Lord, the God of Israel. So this is where we end today's reading. Tomorrow is day 76, and I move on to the second book of Kings, and I will let you know what happens as we continue learning about Elijah. Thank you for listening.